For every burial in the village, whether she was invited or not, Helen would always find her way there. Even when she forgot, even when no one told her, she must hurry, she must be present, and always in her white wedding gown. The villagers thought it was madness, but for Helen it was a routine, one she could never miss. A routine born from pain, intentional pain, sealed by a covenant no one knew about. At every burial, she would stand by the grave, and when no one was looking, she would take a handful of soil. That soil she carried to the small clay statue of her dead husband and the triplet children the king had stolen from her life. Her heart was a graveyard of pain and hatred. The villagers and the king has wiped off the family she loved so much to replace his head and kingship. And now revenge becomes her breath. The innocent will suffer, and when she cannot let go of the pain in her heart, disaster comes and befalls her. This is the story of Helen, the woman who wears her white wedding gown to all burial. To like, subscribe, comment, and share, and drop your thoughts about Helen's story in the comments below. It rained heavily that afternoon. Thick clouds moved across the sky, the type that didn't ask permission before pouring. People rushed to shut their windows and drag clothes off the line. Children were called indoors. Shops locked their gates early. But inside Helen's house, the rain felt different, louder, colder. She sat on the floor in the center of her small parlor, barefoot, soaked in silence. The windows were open. The wind blew through the thin curtains. Her eyes didn't leave the window for a second. Her white wedding gown clung to her body like second skin. It was old now, torn at the edges, stained brown near the hem, but she still wore it like it was new. Her fingers gripped an old photo album resting on her lap. Her wedding documentary, page after page of printed smiles, of handshakes and blessings, of a day that started with hope and ended in fire. She turned the pages aggressively, faster with each flip, until the album shut on its own. She let it fall to the floor. It landed face up on a photo of her and Mr. Madhu standing under a mango tree, his hands resting gently on her stomach. Helen stared at the rain. Her voice came out low, almost like a whisper, but the pains in her heart and eyes is louder. "Will you stop now?" she said, pointing her trembling finger at the rain. No one replied. More like the rain listened to her. The rain outside slowed and eventually stopped. She stood up, walked to the mirror near her bedroom, and stared at herself. "Oh," she muttered, "I'm already dressed." She hadn't even realized it. The gown was on, the same one she wore to every burial, the same one the villagers whispered about, the same one they feared. She looked into mirror and gave a wicked grin. "A very happy day," she said under her breath. The village church always rang the bell 3 times for a funeral. She had heard it in the distance, faint but clear. She never missed one. By the time she reached the compound of Mr. Amadou, the hymn had already started. People were dressed in black, clustered under the canopy. The choir sang quietly. Ushers handed out programs. Some children sat on laps, restless. Then Helen entered. The crowd shifted. Some turned their heads away. Others stared. There was no mistaking her. White gown, bare face, sandals, no umbrella, no greetings, no apologies. She walked like someone who wasn't afraid to be seen. Helen heard everything. She didn't react. She walked toward the coffin and stood in front of it, directly facing the body. Mommy Ada was the first to speak, pointing at her with open disgust. "This shameless woman again. Why can't she stop? Wearing that gown to every burial. It's not normal." A few heads nodded. Mama Zina's voice cut through the whispers. "Don't point at her. Do you think she's mad? She knows exactly what she's doing." A younger woman scoffed. "She's mad, that's all. People like that need prayers." Mama Zina turned to her sharply. "Mad? Then explain why every burial she attends leaves the family cursed. Explain why, after she comes, things start to scatter." Mommy Ada crossed herself quickly. "I cover my family with the blood of Jesus." Helen heard every word. She didn't react. She walked straight to the coffin and stood in front of it, blocking the view. One of the coffin bearers, a tall, muscular man, frowned. "Madam, a beg shift." She didn't move. "I said shift!" He shoved her roughly. Her veil fell to the dirt. Helen bent slowly, picked it up, dusted it, and stepped aside. Her eyes never left his face. For a moment the man looked away, almost uneasy. The service continued. People sang, prayed, and cried. Most left when it ended. Helen stayed. She always stayed. When the compound was nearly empty and the grave freshly covered, she walked to a plantain tree near the edge. The soil there was still loose from digging. She crouched, reached into her gown, and pulled out a small black cloth. Then with her bare hand, she scooped a handful of soil from the grave and let it fall into the cloth. She tied it, placed it back in her gown, and left without a word. That night, screams tore through Mr. Amadu's family compound. The eldest daughter had been in the kitchen when she suddenly dropped the pot she was holding and began to scream. She clawed at her head, tore her wrapper, and shouted words that made no sense. She had run mad. Her brothers tried to hold her down, but she fought like a wild animal, kicking, biting, scratching. She kept screaming the same word. White! 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 By morning, the entire village had heard the story. Back in her house, Helen walked to the corner of her bedroom, where a small clay statue stood on a wooden stool, a rough carving of a man holding a child. She knelt in front of it. Her fingers traced its chest, her voice trembling but sharp. I've done it for you, Madhu. I've made them pay. One more family that will never know peace. Tears slipped down her face, but her tone stayed cold. I will kill more of them. I will make them lose their babies like they made me lose ours. I won't stop until they've all felt it. She pressed her forehead to the statue, eyes shut tight. They buried my peace. Now I will bury theirs. The room was silent, but Helen's war had only just begun. Helen had just finished pulling the veil over her head when the sound started. Gong, gong, gong! The town crier's voice echoed down the street. Attention! Attention! We gather this afternoon for the burial of Chief Okoro's daughter. Helen didn't need the rest of the announcement. She already knew where the house was, and she knew she would be there. She looked at herself in the mirror. The white gown still fit like it was made yesterday. Some people wore theirs once. She wore hers for every death. By the time she entered the Okoro compound, the place was heavy with grief. Okoro's wife was on the ground, wailing and screaming, her headscarf half loose. A few village women knelt beside her, rubbing her back, whispering words of comfort. Helen's first instinct was to head toward the group of men standing under the mango tree, but something made her pause. She turned toward the women instead. The moment the widow saw her, her voice rose above the noise. Who allowed this woman here? Can't you people see she's killing us off one by one? The consoling women tried to hold her down. Sorry, Mommy Okoro. We know it's too much now. She won't do anything. She's just a mad woman. Helen's eyes hardened. I am not mad, she said sharply. This whole village is mad. For killing my husband and my unborn children, then pretending you knew nothing. Her voice cracked. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. A few people nearby stopped to stare. She quickly wiped her face, steadying herself. Then she stepped closer to the widow, her voice calm now. Sorry, Mama Okoro. And with that, she turned and walked toward the men, her fingers brushing the black cloth pouch hidden in her gown. She remembered exactly why she had come. When the service ended and most people drifted away, Helen stayed behind, blending into the shadows. And when everyone was gone, she moved to the grave. Ben slowly pressed her palm into the soft mound, lifted the soil slowly as if weighing it, and let it slide soundlessly into her pouch. She didn't look at anyone as she left. That night, the Okoro family's youngest son, a healthy boy of 6, is woke screaming. He clawed at his own face, shouting that his sister was standing in the corner of his room. By morning, he had vanished. They found him 2 days later, sitting by the riverbank, naked, staring at the water. He never spoke again. The whispers started immediately. People crossed the street when Helen passed. Mothers called their children inside. No one confronted her, but no one greeted her either. That fear had roots that began the night Helen's life ended, the night she became what she was. Before the white gown became a symbol of dread, it had been a symbol of joy. Helen had been married to Madhu, a man who loved her deeply, patiently, without condition. For years they had no children. The gossip grew, but Madhu never turned on her. I married you, not your womb, he would say. Then a miracle. Triplets. The doctor confirmed it during scan. They laughed, danced, and planned their future. Madhu insisted they have a small wedding celebration before the babies came. It was perfect until that night. They were driving to Joss for a quiet honeymoon. Helen rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the hum of the car. Then headlights appeared. Too fast. Too close. A black Range Rover slammed into them. Helen woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. The doctor stood at the foot of her bed. You lost the babies, he said softly. All three. Her voice shook. Where's Madhu? Silence. Where is my husband? The doctor shifted. He's gone. They buried him quickly. The elders said it was better not to show you the body. Her hands trembled. Her ears rang. 3 weeks later, the new king came to visit. He arrived with guards and gifts. Oil, wrappers, money, food. Helen sat on the floor in silence as he tried to comfort her. Then she saw it, on his finger. Madhu's wedding ring, the one she had placed on his hand under the mango tree. Her voice was low. Where did you get that ring? The king smiled faintly. It's just a ring. Helen stood, tipped the tray of gifts, and sent everything crashing to the floor. Get out! The king didn't argue. He left. That night, Helen walked barefoot to the edge of the village, to the hut of a man they called Enso Allah, a magician feared even by the elders. The air inside his hut smelled of burnt leaves and blood. You lost something, he said without looking at her. I lost everything. And you want it back? I want them to suffer. Every single one who had a hand in it. Every single one who stayed silent. He studied her for a moment. There is a price. The gods will not take only from the guilty. They may come for your next love, your next child. Helen's eyes didn't waver. So be it. And so Allah dipped his finger in ash and drew 3 circles on her forehead. From today, the earth will answer to your pain. Wherever you stand, rest will leave. Wherever you take soil, peace will die. No. He burned the hem of her wedding gown with a coal and handed it back. Wear this to every burial. Don't speak. Don't pray. Just collect. Helen took the gown and walked into the darkness. From that night on, the burial bell was no longer a sound of mourning. It was her call. And every burial was a chance to bury someone else's peace. The pot of soup was boiling steadily. Helen stirred it slowly, the rich smell of goat meat filling her small kitchen. Outside, she could hear children playing. It was one of the few mornings she felt almost normal. No bells, no hymns, no crowds dressed in black. She scooped some soup into a small plate and stepped outside to give it to 2 boys sitting under the almond tree. They were neighbors' children, the kind she occasionally fed when they were hungry. The younger one took the plate with a shy smile, but the older boy shook his head. We'll eat at the burial. Helen froze and her eyes narrowed. What burial? The boy looked at his brother quickly, as if he had said something forbidden. Nothing. We just... Helen didn't wait for him to finish. She turned, dropped the ladle on the kitchen counter, and disappeared into her bedroom. Minutes later, she emerged in the white gown. The hem was still stained from the last burial. Her veil hung loosely over her hair. Without another word, she walked toward the road. By the time she reached the compound, the burial was already underway, and it was not a peaceful one. A group of young men were arguing loudly near the gate. 2 women were shouting at each other about who should be sitting under the main canopy. Someone was crying so loudly it drowned out the choir's hymn. The air felt heavy, tense, like the grief had already turned to something else. Helen walked in slowly, her gown brushing against the wet ground. She forced a small smile, pretending warmth. I didn't know. I came to pay my respect. Some people avoided her eyes. Others muttered under their breath. Mama Azine, seated in the corner, leaned toward the man next to her. They didn't tell her. She still came. How? He whispered back. She always knows. Helen moved closer to the coffin. It was a man this time, the head of the family. His widow sat beside the coffin, wiping her face with a damp handkerchief. Helen placed a hand gently on her shoulder. It will not end here. The woman looked up in confusion, thinking it was a word of comfort. Helen's smile didn't reach her eyes. She leaned in slightly and whispered, all of you will follow him, your brothers, your sisters, even the ones not yet born. Madness will be your name." The widow's hand trembled around the handkerchief. Before she could respond, Helen straightened and began moving around the compound, greeting people one by one with false politeness. Her presence made them uneasy. They knew the pattern by now. When the service ended, most people left quickly, murmuring about how to cover themselves in prayer. But Helen stayed behind, watching as the grave was covered. She waited until the last shovel of earth fell. She knelt, scraped the grave's surface with her bare hand until she found the darkest soil, then fed it carefully into the black cloth pouch, making sure the black cloth doesn't touch the ground. She stood slowly, her eyes scanning the compound like she was memorizing every face. Under her breath, she spoke again. "Every goat you buy will die. Every harvest will fail. Your sons will roam the streets. Your daughters will lose their minds. Nothing you build will stand." Her words were quiet, but the air seemed to hold them. That night, the first sign came. The family's eldest son, who had been walking home from the market, began laughing loudly in the middle of the road. People thought it was a joke, until he started tearing his clothes and dancing barefoot in the dust. By dawn, his mother had locked him in a room to stop him from running into the street. 2 days later, their store caught fire in the middle of the night. No one saw how it started. Within a week, a distant cousin was found sitting by the riverbank, rocking back and forth, whispering to himself. The village whispered too, about Helen, the gown, the soil. Back in her house, Helen lit a candle in front of the small clay statue of her husband. She knelt. "I told you I would do it, Madhu. One more family gone. One more name erased from joy." Her fingers traced the statue's cheek. "They thought I wouldn't find them. They thought they could bury their dead in secret. But the earth speaks to me, and the earth belongs to you now." She pressed her forehead against the statue as usual. "I will take everything they love. Even if the gods come for me, I will finish this war." The candle flickered wildly, though the room was still. Helen didn't move. Outside, the faint sound of a drum carried through the night. Slow, heavy, her lips curved into a thin smile. Another burial was coming, and she would be there. For the first time in years, the bell rang in the village, and Helen didn't move. She was in the kitchen, kneading dough for meat pies, when the sound carried through the window. 3 slow tolls. She stopped. Her hands froze mid-fold. The bell rang again. She stood there for a moment, then wiped her hands on her wrapper and kept working. Outside, children whispered to each other, "She's not going." Mama Azine, passing by with her basket, glanced at Helen's window. She almost stopped in her tracks. "Maybe the gods have released her," she muttered to herself. It wasn't just one burial she missed. She missed the next and the next. Weeks turned into months. People began to breathe easier. Some said she had finally repented. Others thought maybe she was sick. The truth was simpler. Helen had met Chike. He wasn't like the men who avoided her in the market or crossed the road when she walked by. Cheek greeted her without fear, bought vegetables from her stall, and even joked with her. At first, she thought he was pretending, but he kept coming. They began to talk, sometimes about simple things, the weather, the price of yams, sometimes about heavy things, loss, loneliness. Cheek didn't push. He didn't ask about the gown. One evening, he came with roasted corn and palm wine. They sat outside her house, eating in comfortable silence. Helen caught herself smiling. Not the sharp, thin smile she wore at burials, but a real one. Days turned into weeks. The sound of the burial bell no longer pulled her like a chain. She stayed home, cooked, and laughed, cautiously, like someone testing if joy was still allowed. Cheek started fixing things around her house. The leaky roof, the squeaky door. She started going to the market again without feeling all eyes on her. For the first time in a long time, she felt almost human. But not everyone believed in her change. One afternoon, as she was washing clothes outside, Mama Azine stopped at her gate. "I see you're staying away from burials now," she said carefully. Helen didn't look up. "Yes. Good, it's better that way. Leave the dead alone. Leave the living alone too." Helen's hands paused in the soapy water. "I don't know what you think you know, Mama Azine." "I know enough." Their eyes met. Neither looked away. Then Mama Izine nodded slightly and walked on. Cheek didn't know about the conversation. All he knew was that Helen was opening up more. She started telling him about Madhu, about the triplets she lost, about how the village buried her peace long before they buried her husband. Cheek listened. Sometimes he held her hand. One night he looked at her across the small table where they ate. "Helen, you can start again. With me." Her chest tightened. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But that night she dreamed of a child's laughter. When she missed her period, she didn't tell Cheek at first. She wasn't sure she believed it herself. But when the test confirmed it, she sat on the bed, staring at the small strip in her hand. A life inside her. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The village noticed she was different, softer. She wore bright wrappers again. She even visited the church once. Whispers changed from fear to cautious curiosity. Maybe the gods spared her. Maybe the new man broke the curse. Helen didn't care what they thought. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a weapon in her hand. But far away in the hut at the edge of the village, Insoala sat before a small fire, tossing bones into the flames. They landed in a pattern that made his eyes narrow. He knew she had stopped. He knew she had broken the pact. And he knew the gods never forget. That night as Helen slept, the wind outside her window began to howl. The candle in her room went out. In the darkness, a whisper curled through the air. "You belong to us." Helen woke suddenly, clutching her stomach. The baby kicked hard, almost painfully. She sat up, listening to the silence. For the first time in months, fear crept back into her chest. And somewhere in the village, the burial bell rang. She didn't move, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. It started quietly. One afternoon, Cheek didn't come home from the market. Helen thought maybe he had gone to see friends. But when he returned after dark, his clothes were dirty, his eyes wild. He was mumbling to himself, "They're calling me. I can hear them in the ground." Helen tried to calm him, but he pushed her away. By morning, he was gone again, wandering the streets, laughing at nothing. The villagers whispered, "It's happening again." "She has cursed him." Helen ignored them. She focused on the baby. But as her belly grew heavy, her legs began to ache. By the 8th month, she couldn't stand for long. By the 9th, she could barely walk. When the 12th month came and the baby still hadn't arrived, she knew. The pact. Enso Allah came to her house one night, unannounced. The firelight from his lantern threw long shadows on the walls. "You broke the agreement." Helen didn't answer. "The gods are patient until they are not. Go back, attend a burial, feed them the soil they crave." She shook her head. "I'm done." "Then you will pay in blood." He stepped closer. "The child inside you will never see the sun. Your lover will rot in the mind before he rots in the body. Your bones will fail before your breath does." Helen's voice was firm. "I said I'm done. Let God judge me, not your spirits." Enso Allah's eyes narrowed. "Even God respects the laws of the earth." Then he turned and left. From that night, the pain began. It started in her lower back. Sharp, stabbing. Then her legs gave way beneath her. She could not walk. She crawled from bed to chair to bed. Cheek didn't help. He was too far gone, sitting outside in the dust, humming tunelessly. Neighbors stopped visiting. Children ran when they saw her. The contractions began after the 13th month, but the baby didn't come. She screamed into the night. Sweat soaked her gown. Then in the dark they came. Shapes, not men, not entirely human, filled her room. Their faces were shadow, their eyes like burning coal. One of them leaned close. "We warned you." A heavy hand pressed down on her chest. Helen gasped. Her right side went numb. She realized she couldn't move her arm. A stroke. Her vision blurred. "Please, mercy." The shapes laughed, a sound like shovels digging. For 3 days the labor dragged on. She drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering prayers. She saw flashes of Madhu's face. She thought of the baby she had lost. On the 4th day, she felt something shift inside her. A final wave of pain tore through her body, and then silence. The midwife, pale and shaking, held up the child. "It's a boy!" Helen reached for him, but the midwife didn't move. "He's not crying." Helen's stomach dropped. The boy's skin was warm, his chest rising and falling, but his eyes were open, staring past everyone in the room. On his left shoulder was a dark birthmark, perfectly shaped like a small mound of earth. A burial mound. Before Helen could speak, the door slammed open. Enzo Allah stood there, his eyes wide, not with anger, but fear. He stepped forward, staring at the child. "What kind of woman are you?" He backed away, almost stumbling. "The pact, it didn't take him. It should have taken him." Helen clutched her son tighter. "Leave." Enzo Allah turned and ran into the night as if something was chasing him. The baby still didn't cry. He simply stared at his mother, silent, breathing. The room was cold, too cold for the season. Helen lay back, weak, her eyes never leaving his face. She thought of the years she had spent at graves, of the soil she had stolen, of the family she had broken, and she knew the past had not left her. Outside, the burial bell rang, 3 slow tolls. Helen closed her eyes. For the first time, she did not think about going. She thought about the child in her arms, and the mark on his skin. Some mercy still carried scars.